Okay, we're going to go through some examples of the if, else if statements. There are three that we're going to demonstrate. We're going to demonstrate the two-way selection, where you have a true and a false path. We're going to demonstrate the if, where you just have a true path only. And we're going to demonstrate the multi-way, where you have several different alternatives to choose from. So we're going to start from the simplest and move to the most progressive. So let's first talk about the if statement, okay? So let's look at the program that I've already keyed for us. And let's just kind of go with what we talk about what we have set up so far. So I have my first line of code, which is enter your grade, okay? So we learned how to do this back in chapters 1 and 2. So we should all be comfortable and good on that. We know that whatever the user puts in as the grade, that value is going to be assigned to this variable, okay? Now, my condition, this is what I am testing for. I'm saying if the grade is greater than 90, the value 90. Now, the way that we write a single alternative, you might have a program that you only want something to happen if it's true. If it's not true, the program should continue on with the rest of its day, okay? So that means you're going to only have a true path only. This would be my true path. So this would be what I want to happen if the value of grade is greater than 90. Notice that when I look at this, and what you've been reading in the lecture notes, is that I have my if. This is my condition, okay? If the value of grade, this is that logical operator we were talking about. And here's the value that I'm testing for. Okay, this is a Boolean expression, meaning the value of grade is either going to be greater than 90 or lower than 90. Either this is going to be true or this is going to be false. No in between, true or false, okay? And all of our conditions must be written in this fashion. So if this is true, then the value of message is going to be assigned the string grade. So that's what's going to happen if it's true. If it is false, then we don't have another alternative to take place. We don't have another alternative, okay? So it would just skip down to the next line in the code, which would be print the value of message, okay? Print the value of message. So let's just kind of take a moment and look at how this works, okay? So, and I'm going to add one more thing because I want to be clear that this is testing for if it's true, and if it's not true, then it's just going to skip to the next line of code after the selection. So I'm going to print something else, maybe say, have a great day, okay, just to add another line of code. So let's try to run this and see what happens. So when I run my module, I'm going to update the save, and it's asking me for a grade. So I'm going to move this over, excuse me, just a little bit so that you can kind of see my code and what's going on. So I'm going to enter the grade amount, okay? So I'm going to put in that their grade was a 95. Hit enter. Look what happens. It's going to print the value of message, which is great, and it's going to print my next message, which is have a great day, okay? So that's what happens if it's true. Now let's take a moment and look at what happens if it's false. So I'm going to run this again, okay? So we're going to come here and I'm going to say enter the grade. Let's say I put it in 80. So we know that the value of 80 would actually not be greater than 90. So let's look at what happens when this condition evaluates to be false. So if the value of grade is greater than 90, so 80 is greater than 90, that is false. So watch what happens when we hit enter, okay? It's going to give us a message. Now, I want to go through this because this is a great demonstration on the example I'm using. Well, the next line of code told it to print the value of message, okay? Well, message would be an empty string in this case. And because message has not been given any kind of declaration, that's why I'm getting this traceback message, okay? It's saying, wait a minute, well, what is message? That has not been defined, okay? Now, that's okay because this is just a very small sample. So I'm going to continue with this because I want you to see that you could possibly run into this. So the problem here is because we did not processed the true path, then this line of code was never processed. So what happened is I got the grade, they put in 80. If 80 is greater than 90, that is false. It skips over this line of code and it jumps here and says print message. Well, when you say print message, your interpreter is saying, well, wait a minute, where did message come from? That's incorrect, okay? So there's really not another way for me to test this other than to show you how the logic of the program flows, okay? How the logic of the program flows. But let's assume, and I could make some changes to this. I might come here and so I can kind of show you what happens. I might come here and say print great, okay? And I can come here and delete this message just so that I can demonstrate what happens between the two. Now let's run it this way. So instead of assigning a value to a variable, I'm just going to do a print statement. So we're going to say run the module, update it, okay? Enter your grade. I put in 80. Okay, see what happens? Is 80 greater than 90? No, it's not. So the next thing that happened in that code is it skips over the print great. Because if it's not true, it's not going to process that. It's going to jump to the next line of code, which is the have a great day. So I'm just going to let you kind of compare the differences between the two. But the previous example, so this is two examples. So the previous example where we got this error message is a perfect example on working with variables and how if we have not given a variable a value, it's going to give us a message, okay, or an error message. So while my example led to a mistake, it's a great mistake to demonstrate to you because you may possibly run into this as well. So 2 examples in 1. Hope you find that helpful. In the next example, we're going to go back to our message being great, and we're going to demonstrate having a true path and a false path. So let's go back and say that message does equal great. Oops. Okay. And we're going to say else message equals not great. Or we'll say good. All right, so let's test and see how this works. Again, we're determining whether or not the value of grade is equal to 90. If it does, and that is true, we're going to print the message great. If it does not, and the value is less than 90, we're going to print the message good, okay? So let's kind of work with this for a moment and see what happens, okay? Now, for my else, I almost forgot. Have to have a semicolon behind the else. You have to have a semicolon behind the else. So let's run this and see what happens. And this is an example of having a true and a false path, okay? So when I'm here, and I'm just going to move it over a little. So when I'm here, I'm going to enter the grade. So let's say I put in 95. You see what I did? I forgot to tell it to print the value of message. Let me go back to my code and let me add in my print statement. Print the value of message. Let's try that again. So we're going to run my module and we're going to update it. So some of the slip-ups I'm having are great examples of stuff that, you know, as programmers, we run into those things all the time. So let's say 95. It printed the message great. So once it evaluated whether the 95 was greater than the 90 and it was true, it processes the message great. And it leaves the decision structure and jumps down to print. So because this evaluated to be true, it does not process the false path. And what I tell my students in programming all the time is that else means false, okay? Else is either going to mean false or it's going to mean if I have not met any of the other alternatives, then I'm automatically going to do this. So else is kind of like either your false or your default thing to do. Let's run this again. So I'm going to go back to my shell and I'm going to say restart the shell, okay? Excuse me. So this time, I am going to close it out. So let's run it from over here from idle. We're going to run this module again and we're here. So we're going to put in our grade. So this time I'm going to put in 85. And it's going to say good. If you go back over here, if 85 is greater than 90, that is false. 85 is not greater than 90. So it does not process the true path, but it jumps down to the else, and it processes the false path because 89 is not greater than 90. 85 is not greater than 90. And once it assigns the value good to message, it then proceeds to the next line of code after your decision structure, and it's going to show the value of message, which at that point the value of message is going to be good. Now let's demonstrate the third type of decision. So I'm going to back myself up a little bit, and we're going to go back up here to the beginning. And this is when you have more than one alternative. More than one alternative. Okay? So let's say, for example, and I'm going to talk as I type. So I have my if the grade is greater than 90. Okay? Well, elif, that means this is my next alternative. The grade is greater than 70. I'm going to say message is equal to good. And if I have a third alternative, I might say elif, the grade is greater than 50. Then I might say that message equals poor. Okay. Now, then I might say else, because that's what I want to happen by default. So if it's not greater than 90, it's not greater than 70, it's not greater than 50, then I'm going to say, if it didn't meet any of those criteria, then it's going to be, you know, some kind of default. So I might say print, or I might say message, whoops, equals invalid grade. Okay. And then I'm going to print the value of message. Whoops. So let's run this real quick and see how this processes. One thing I'll say real quick is the elif. If you have ever done any type of programming before, when I first started to acclimate myself with Python, I thought this was the weirdest thing. So if you have any programming experience, you might be used to the word else if. But in Python, the syntax is elif, which was kind of weird to me because I'm a C++ programmer. So elif was kind of weird to me. But anyway, that's like your alternative. So it's if, elif, elif, and then the last line is always else. Let's run this real quick and see some of the things that we're going to come up with. Okay, so we're here. Let's assume that you put in the grade was 95. Okay, then it's going to say great. Let's try it again. And this time, let's put in a -5. Invalid grade. So that's a great way to do error trapping, right? Great way to do error trapping. Let's try this again. Let's run it again. Enter your grade. So let's say this time we put in 75. It gives us the message good. So let's talk for a moment about how that worked. So if I have if 75 is greater than 90, that is false. So it jumps to the next line of code. If 75 is greater than 70, well, that is true. So then the value of good is assigned to message, and it leaves the selection structure. And it does not process any of these next lines of code. It jumps down to the print statement. Okay? So that's very important for you to understand how that works. You say, if that value is greater than 90, it's not. Else if that value is greater than 70. Let's say it's not. Else if that value is greater than 50. It is. That's true. Then we would leave from here after we process this path, and we would leave and go to the next line after your structure. If I didn't meet any of these alternatives, so I was not greater than 90, I was not greater than 70, not greater than 50, then by default, I'm going to be invalid grade. I hope this was helpful.